everybody. It's Kelly and Jim with the X-Files Preservation Collection, and we're here talking with Prop Master Ken Hawryliw. How are you, Ken?
Hey, good. Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm all right.
So Ken, let's dive right into this.
All right. Just don't ask me what my favorite prop was from the show, okay? Because I hate that.
That's like picking a favorite child.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Yeah.
When did you work on the show?
I worked on a show. Let's go back. When they did the pilot, they called me about the pilot. Unfortunately, I wasn't available. I was working on this really crappy Richard Grieco TV movie about street drag racing, and so I wasn't able to do the pilot, which I regret, because I would have liked to have done everything that was done up here in Vancouver, but I also think I could have done a better job on the pilot. There's a few things that were glaring mistakes in the pilot, and I sort of took when we did the props on the seasons that I did, which was season 1 through 5. We sort of took a different tack than the prop master did on the pilot. He thought he was working on a science fiction show, and I thought I was working on an FBI procedural show that happened to have fantastic crimes in it. And that's kind of because I really felt that the mantra was, and this kind of came from Chris Carter, but this is kind of how I approached it anyway. The things that you have control over, you want to make as realistic as possible. So anything having to do in the real world with the police procedure, technically how the props look on screen, any of that stuff, you want to make that as believable as possible. And then if you do that, then the audience will come along on the fantastical things and they'll buy into that. And that's so I never ever thought the show was a science fiction show. I never thought it was a horror show. I never thought it was a supernatural show. I treated it like an FBI procedural show. And then we did the fantastical things that came along with it.
Right.
So yeah, anyway, so that's a long-winded answer, but I did the first 5 seasons doing props, and then I wrote in this season 6.
Right. That's very interesting how his perspective,
Yeah,
it is, because a lot of people look at it as, horror, science fiction.
Yeah, I never did. And Chris, if you interviewed Chris, I don't know, it was always a bugaboo for Chris that people called it a science fiction show, because he didn't look at it that way either. So
right. Well, it did encompass so much. It encompassed so many genres. You kind of had to not.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
How did you land the job for working on the show?
Well, I just got a phone call. I had worked with a production manager previously, years and years ago, and he called me for the pilot. And then when the series was picked up, he called me back again, and I was excited and happy to work on it, because a lot of the themes and the subject matter of the show was things that I would read about in my spare time that interested me anyway. So I had a fair bit of background knowledge, so it was a perfect fit for me to do this in a lot of ways.
Right,
And one thing that really happened a lot when early on is that when we start doing some episodes, there would be references to certain things in the scripts, like in the Jersey Devil episode from season 1, there would be in the script referencing the Patterson film for Bigfoot, and I knew what that was, because that's stuff that I'd studied. That's the stuff I read about. I knew what Chris was talking about. So there was kind of a shorthand in a way for me. There wasn't a big learning curve for the subject matter, because it was just there were things that I was interested in anyway. I had been a UFO buff since I was a kid in elementary school. I did a project where a group of us went and interviewed a UFO expert who had seen UFOs and studied UFOs. So I knew a lot about that kind of stuff. And then I was also a horror fan. I'm wearing an Alice Cooper T-shirt here because I've always been a horror fan. So a lot of that sort of came through. It was just really easy for me in that way.
Right, right. And good musical taste, Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
The king, man. He's the godfather of shock rock,
You
and
better believe it.
he recorded an X Files album. He did an X Files song with the
Yes.
Rob Zombie, the Key of X. Yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah,
got two good ones right there, you know?
absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because I talked to his. I used to email back and forth with his personal assistant for a while, and he was a huge X Files fan. So
Oh, good to
yeah,
know.
I know. Yeah, it's good.
I mean, well, back in the day, man, you know, when the show started taking off and then when it really started blowing up, who wasn't an X-File fan? I mean, you couldn't turn on
It,
even the news. It was just all over the place.
yeah, it's so funny because now it got to the point where back, you literally you couldn't go through a checkout counter in a supermarket and just row after row after row of X Files magazines, covers of
Right.
David and Jillian or Chris on them, and it got to the point where I almost didn't tell people what show I was working on because the minute you did, you'd be halted in your tracks. And you'd have to have a 15-minute conversation. And
Right.
those are the fans. You never want to disappoint the fans. You never want to snub the fans. You never want to be rude to the fans. That's the reason why we had a job. I mean, that's
Yeah.
because of the fans.
Right. And I was right behind you at the checkout line buying 10, 20, 30 of those magazines.
Hey, listen. I did it for a while. I'd never worked on a show that had that kind of high profile, and man, I have boxes downstairs of every magazine that was out at the time, and eventually I had to stop doing it. It just got ridiculous. Just every time I moved, I was moving 20 boxes of magazines. So I had to
You don't have to
stop
tell
doing
us.
it.
We know what that's like.
I know.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, what attracted me to this show was when I was younger, I used to sit with my brother and I mean Darren McGavin and Kolchak,
Oh yeah, I
I
loved it.
mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's what it brought me back,
yeah,
to when I used to watch that, you
yep.
know. And what I liked about the X-Files was, I mean, you had your horror type, then you had the mythology and stuff. It was just a nice balance,
It
And I
was
gotta
it was perfect. It was the what they call the Monster of the Week episodes,
the
and then the
best.
mythology episodes. It was just the mythology episodes came in just at the right time
Mhm.
every few episodes to sort of keep it going for the mythology and keep the fans interested in that part of it. So it was great, and I love the overarching story arc of the mythology also, and you never really clearly got to figure it
No.
out, which was great, right? There's still so many unanswered questions even at the very end.
Yeah, I mean, back then, I mean, it was you had to wait a week, and it was like your
Yes. Oh
mind is
yeah.
like
Oh
going
yeah.
nuts, like what the heck, what the heck. But then
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
guys would throw in this cliffhanger,
Yeah.
and then you have to wait months,
Yeah. The
and
summer
it
Yeah.
was like,
breaks.
damn, why'd you do that?
Yeah. I know, it was awesome. It was great. It
But
was great. It was great for us. Like I say, if because of the subject matter, if I weren't working on the show, I'd be watching it every week, just like the rest of you. Honestly, and I'd be waiting till the Friday or Sunday, whenever it aired, that whatever depending on the season it was. That's where I'd be too. So it was great.
yeah, but when you guys were up in Vancouver filming, you
Hmm.
know, I mean, just the biggest prop of it all was Vancouver itself.
Well, Chris has said many times in interviews, and he said the three main stars of the show were David, Jillian, and Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I don't, in a lot of ways, I don't think you could have started doing that show anywhere else, because we have such a diversity of topography here, and you're 3 hours away from desert, like real desert. So if you have to do those kinds of episodes, or even we did the Anasazi episode. It was done in a rock quarry, just around the corner from where I live, actually. So it's I don't think you could do that anywhere else. And to be honest, and it's going to sound like sour grapes, because I was very bummed when the show left here. I would have loved to do that forever, honestly, but I think it lost something when it went to Los Angeles.
It was too sunny.
Too sunny. It needed the gloom. It needed the gray skies and the gloom and the soft light. And I think it needed all of that stuff, to be honest. I mean,
Definitely.
that was
what really picks up Vancouver is one of my. I mean, I got a lot of favorites, but one of my favorite episodes is, I love the episode Shapes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can really see Vancouver, the gloom and all that. It made that episode awesome.
Yeah, it's so funny because there's so many episodes now. I mean, after we did I don't know 100 and whatever episodes after 5 seasons, and it just I hear the titles, and sometimes it'll just come back to me like that. Other times I just know there was something really cool in that, but I can't remember what it was. You know what I mean? But it was always interesting.
Right.
I mean, it's like, because they weren't all pearls, but there weren't too many duds either. Certainly in the first. Pardon
me. Five was like my favorite season, so you worked on some really good episodes.
My favorite season was season 3. I think we hit our stride perfectly. The last little bit of season 2 and all of season 3, that was like, to me, that was where the X-Files lived, right there. You like 5? Yeah.
3 and 5, yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I like them all, but I love, it's the first season's what really hooked me. First season.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was. It's not like the format changed or the show changed, but there was something in the style of it in the first few seasons. We got directors who were, for lack of a better word, in on the joke. They knew what we were doing, and you kind of weeded out after a while the kind of the director of the week that would come in, and they thought they were just directing a TV show, so they didn't really kind of know what the style was, didn't know what the kind of feel for the show was. And then we got, when we got Kim Manners and Rob Bowman, our main directors, and David Nutter, you look at those episodes, and if you go back to the first season, all the best episodes were directed by those guys. And it was by the time season 3 rolled around, we really kind of hit our stride, and we were making the X-Files the way it should be made. We kind of worked out all the bugs. We had a system. And keep in mind, this is episodic television, and episodic television had never been done on this scale before.
All right.
We set I can honestly say we set the bar very high. I mean, episodic television had never spent the kind of money that we spend it on a weekly basis. I mean, there'd be some shows like DSV or something that would have huge, lavish sets, but once the sets were built, that was it. They didn't spend another dime after that. We spent triple the budget of any other show on television at the time. Just trying, A, because the show was in a different place every week, and B, because we just want to make the best show possible. And Chris was a stickler for detail and perfection, and we never wanted to disappoint him, and we never wanted to disappoint ourselves either, to be honest.
Right.
The other thing that was in terms of the props, specifically, is that Chris never wanted to see the props repeated from episode to episode, in terms of like really hero specific props that were for a specific episode. He didn't want to see those repeated, and he felt that would take you out of the show a little bit, and so we ended up with a huge inventory of props that we were only ever used in one episode, like really expensive props that were designed and manufactured from scratch that only ever appeared in one episode. So, and I think you have a lot of them.
Yeah, we're trying to get them all, but
I'm just trying to get them all.
Slowly.
It's a great thing you're doing, to be honest. I tried to do something similar when the show left here. We sent down a 53-foot trailer full of props. We had like 780 some boxes of props that sent down to Los Angeles, and I knew deep down in my heart that they weren't going to use them because Chris didn't want to repeat anything. So they sat in a warehouse somewhere for ages, and I'm sure some went to the Fox archives, but I know that those things weren't reused because that was just verboten. I mean, that was just not what we did. So.
Right.
Yeah, well, as you know, Chris donated a bunch of stuff to us.
Yeah.
And I saw some pictures of, his stuff that, the detail of cataloging that he did with all his stuff was just, it was mind blowing.
Yeah. Well, he's a stickler for detail for sure.
Yeah, we found that out.
Yeah, I mean, there was even just in the things like, I joked earlier that don't ask me what my favorite prop was, but probably of all the stuff that we did, what I really liked the best was actually the X-Files, creating the X-Files, the actual files.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, it was I was inspired by Apocalypse Now for that. And we created this. I don't know if you've seen Apocalypse Now. The dossier that Willard gets that he goes throughout. He gets various dossiers and files sent to him, and just the texture of that was just incredible. And I wanted to reproduce that, and which didn't come without its problems. I mean, we found out that you can't feed onion skin paper through a photocopier. What it tends to do is light the photocopier on fire. Oh. So whenever we did that, the flimsy onion skin, it had to be typed by hand, and you couldn't copy it. So, that was just. But that's just attention to detail. Just gave it some great texture to it, that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So
we have a couple of those files, and it's pretty interesting, like to look at the detail and like how everything is typed out, and then like every once in a while you see some like nonsense typed in there, just like.
Well, we didn't. Those must be later files because we didn't do too much nonsense. Usually, if stuff was in there, it was in there for a reason and had a very specific purpose. Because the whole thing about it is you didn't really know how it was going to end up on the screen, and if you had something in there that wasn't in there, that would not be a big hit with CC.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And although we did hide some little Easter eggs in there and stuff, but there wasn't a lot of that. It had to be, we had to have deniability that it had to be right. It had to be correct to the story, because the whole thing about that is two things. And I did this. This has always been my kind of philosophy about paper props like that, is that at the very least it has to serve the story. It has to, when you see it on screen, if you get a close up, the right thing has to be in there. But even more so, I think that for the actor reading it, you don't want to have anything in there that's going to distract them, because they've got a job to do. And if they're reading something, and I'll tell you, you can see it in their eyes. If they're reading something in a file, you can see, I've done it a couple of times with Jillian, just for laughs in rehearsal. We'd put in something that was just a joke thing. We take it out and then put the right thing in there when we actually shot the take, because you don't want to have the actors distracted. Whatever they're reading, it's got to be exactly the right stuff. It's got to be what should really be in there, and not just be some mulch or BS. It's got to have the right stuff in there. So every file was created by hand. Everything was typed that had to be typed. There was a lot of times you couldn't photocopy those files. You just had to make copies by hand, because otherwise they wouldn't look right. They wouldn't have the right texture.
Right. In your job, when you were working on the show, how big a crew did you have?
Well, it started off very small. It started off like a regular TV show, and by the time we were done, we probably had, let's see, I had two main assistants, prepping assistant prop masters that basically worked in the office and then fed the set. And then I'd have an assistant prop master on set, and we'd have two people on set, minimum two people on set, depending if we had big extras days, we'd have extra labor on set. and then we had a couple of people to do second units. It's so funny because I remember one day we had, the show actually had what, 4 or 5 call sheets one day, because we had main unit, we had a second unit, we had an insert unit, we had a plate unit that was shooting stuff for the Anasazi episode, and then we had a photo unit, which I was directing, because all the photographs that we used to have in the show, I directed all of those, because that was anything that was used as a prop. That was myself going out with the photographer and staging all those photographs. So we had our own all call sheet that way. So I think we had at one time, actually, we had on one day we had 15 people working on one day. But normally our department was 7 people.
Interesting.
Yeah. We had 2 buyers, a researcher, and my 2 assistants, me. Yeah, so it would have been 7 or 8 people full time on it. We had a full-time researcher because, and she did research for other departments too, but it was primarily for us. But because this was in the infancy of the internet, there was no Google at that time when we started the show. And so when you did research, you did old-fashioned research. You went to the library, or you got on the phone, did detective work, and got on the phone and talked to people to get their help to find out what the police uniforms with the badges and whatever sidearm that the particular sheriff's department in Alabama used in this particular county, or you don't just look it up on Google back then. You had to actually get on the phone and after about second season, it got really easy because everybody wanted to help us. I mean,
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I put a thing on Facebook. I told a story about a couple of research stories. And if you got time, you want to hear a couple of good research stories. Our researcher's name was Jeanne. She's a British lady. She had a really kind of refined British accent. She was from West Sussex in England. And she was perfect because I'm from Canada. My friends from Canada. We're basically a former colony of Britain, right? So we've got Britain and England is ingrained in us, right? But Americans dealing with Americans on the phone are intimidated by people with British accents because they automatically think that the person they're dealing with is in authority, or they're smarter than they really are, or whatever. So she could get people but also she was very charming. Jeanne was very charming, and she could get people to get information for us that there was no way they would ever give anybody else, just because she charmed them. And she was like, it was like her voice was like butter on the phone, and so it was just, and combined with that accent.
Yeah.
And an example of it, I'll give you 2 examples if you want to hear a couple examples. I'll give you really 2 examples of what she did, and show you how you guys are American, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll show you how your tax dollars were spent.
Okay.
So
I don't know if I want to know.
So here's the first example. We needed there's an episode, and I think you're gonna have to help me with the episode name because I can't remember. I just finished a series that I just finished working on that went for 8 seasons. So trying to remember titles of episodes is just But anyways, there was an episode where there was a UFO crashed in the South Pacific Ocean. And we needed to have photographs of this UFO on a cargo ship being transported from the South Pacific through the Panama Canal up the eastern seaboard into the naval shipyard in Norfolk, Virginia. So we could get some really good satellite images of the ocean from satellites. We could buy those. We could get it really good. The only things, and we got really good, going along the coast, all that kind of stuff. We get really good images where we superimpose the picture of the boat with the flying saucer on the back. What we couldn't get images of was the Panama Canal. We couldn't get anything image, and Norfolk the naval shipyard there. The reason of which, because they're both military installations, and so you won't, if you look on Google Earth, there'll be blacked out places. Those are the kind of places that would be blacked out.
Yeah.
But there was no Google Earth at that time, so it was just basically talking, trying to get satellite photos. So Jan happened to find a satellite relay station. I don't know how she found this, somewhere in Virginia, and the guys. It was just fortuitous because they happened to be snowed in and they were really bored. They couldn't go home because they couldn't take they were snowed in. It was like a terrible snowstorm, and so they couldn't get down this. It was in Virginia or West Virginia. It might have been West Virginia. And these were the guys that take satellites. So she said, ask them if they have any photos that we could use of those two specific areas that we couldn't get, the Panama Canal and the Virginia Naval Shipyard. In Norfolk, rather. And they said, oh, yeah, well, you won't be able to get those. And so they were telling a story about how they were having really bad weather and all this stuff. And it was, just kind of small talk to butter them up. And all of a sudden she heard this clicking on the line. And she thought, oh, maybe, oh my goodness, the line's going to go dead. Oh, no, this is something, the wires are freezing or whatever. The phone line's going to go to. And she asked the guy, "What's that clicking sound?" He goes, "Oh, sorry, that's me. While I'm talking to you, I'm just entering some data on the computer here. I'm reprogramming a couple of spy birds. I've got a couple of satellites going over those areas. We'll get some snaps for you, and we'll get them off to you." So he reprogrammed a couple of spy satellites to take photographs for us, put them in a snowcat, sent them down the mountain, got them off to the FedEx depot, and got them to by the next day.
Nice.
So
that's some power right there.
Yeah. That's the power of the X-Files. You say you're working the X-Files, particularly with people in the military, they love the show, right? And the other one story I'll tell you too is had to do the Pentagon. Jeanne had some really good contacts at the Pentagon. Now, normally what happens with doing research for any kind of military stuff for the film industry, you have to go through the film office liaison department, liaison for the military, and they have an office at Beverly Hills. It's like each branch of the military there has an office, and if you need sort of technical information, you have to go through them. I call it Camp Beverly Hills, but the guy that we were dealing with there was just the Air Force guy would not help us. Like it was. We'd get a script and we'd start prepping this episode, and we're going to start shooting this thing in 8 days. So you have very little time. Well, he insisted on having the script in advance and reading the script and making sure there was nothing derogatory or going out perusing the script and looking at that. And then I said, well, how long is this going to take? Well, probably I can get it back to you, get you the information in about 3 weeks. I said, well, we don't have time for that. So I said to Jeanne, can you get a hold of that guy at the Pentagon that helped us with that other thing? And I can't remember what it was, but there was a colonel that she had spoke to at the Pentagon. Really, he was the guy that was really charmed by her accent more than anybody else. So we needed photos of what the was it Andrews or Edwards? What's the one in Washington? It's Andrews Air Force Base.
Yeah.
I think it's Andrews, where the president flies out of, right? We needed photos of what the security police looked like, to see what kind of badges or whatever that and also their vehicles, because one of my jobs was dressing all the vehicles with decals and stuff to make them look authentic. So we needed reference photos, and once again, there was no internet like it is today. So I said, well, do you happen to ask him if he happens to have photos of what those guys look like? And they didn't. But what he did is he said, well, I'm going to send a couple of photographers down to Andrews. We'll get the photos for you, and we'll send them up to you. Now, this is in the days of there was no digital cameras back then either, so the photos had to be. Well, fortunately, the Pentagon has their own photo lab, so they could process them in-house. They dispatched 2 Air Force photographers to Andrews, took all the photos, came back to the Pentagon, processed them, blew them up 8 by 10, put them in a thing. But unfortunately, excuse me, we'd missed the FedEx pickup time.
Oh no.
And we really wanted to have these the next day because I was having a show and tell with Chris and the director to show them these pictures to show what these guys look like. He said, "Oh, well, that's no problem, little lady. I can I can get those out to you." He goes, "Oh, how you gonna do that?" So he sent them back to Andrews, put them in an F-15, and flew them to Kentucky.
Wow.
And they got to the FedEx office in time to get it so we could have them for the next morning at 10 a.m. So I can't even imagine what that cost.
It don't matter because it was for the X-Files. So
it was for the X. It's exactly what it was for the X-Files. And he said,
$10 well spent.
Yes.
He said, yeah, it was. I'll just call it a training mission. You know,
if it works.
That's kind of scary, though, that she had that kind of power.
She did have some power.
But you know, she was mortified. Well, the other thing too is there was another episode called I don't know. Is this interesting to you? I don't know. I'll tell you the story. And there was another episode called Tasteless Dos Bitches. And there was a prop in there. It was a burial urn that had a skeleton. Do you remember this? Had a skeleton.
Absolutely.
Huge big thing. But anyways, I have a small version of it actually that the prop maker made for me as a miniature version of it. But anyway, so we had to find out. First of all, we had to research where this. We're trying to determine what country this was supposed to come from while we're in prep, and it was one country, and while that particular they don't bury their people in urns there, and it had to. So we finally found a place where they actually buried people in the urns, and so we wanted to find out. It was Ecuador. That's right. It was Ecuador. It ended up being Ecuador. And I just remembered, and trying to be as technically accurate as possible, I just happened to remember reading in Time magazine a few months earlier that the UN had put in place legislation that you could not transport human remains over international boundaries. It was a new law, and it was a big deal. It was because what happened was, and particularly in South America, artifacts were being pilfered, and what they're trying to avoid doing what the Brits did for centuries, where they went into every country in the world and stole their artifacts and mummies and put them on display in the British Museum. But anyways, so they passed this new law, and I said, get a hold of. I asked Jeanne to get a hold of the ambassador for Ecuador, who we happen to have the consulate here, and ask them if in the story, if it's technically accurate that we could actually transport human remains from Ecuador to somewhere like, let's say, Boston, and just to find out in theory if that were possible. And so something got lost in the translation, and I was sitting in my office, and Jeanne was out doing something, and somebody else was just a person that was on the working for the day as an extra buyer happened to be in there and picked up Jeanne's phone, and he says, "Oh, no, Jeanne's not here. I'm sorry. Oh, yes, Mr. Ambassador. Yes, Mr. Ambassador. Oh, I'll be sure to tell her. Oh, no. I think it'll be fine." And what she had told the undersecretary of whatever was that we needed to have this information or we couldn't film the episode, because we wanted to make sure that the episode was as technically accurate as possible. So that got somehow lost in translation, and it got to, so the ambassador was phoning and saying, "Tell GM not to stop the filming. Under no circumstances, stop the filming. I'm sending the document that you need." Basically, he was sending us a permit to transfer human remain artifacts from Ecuador to Boston, thinking that we were asking for a permit to do it. We were just asking for information, just to find out if it was possible. And,
wow.
and so he sent the permit to us. I still got it somewhere, and the letter had the Ecuadorian embassy that said that we had the permission to do this. But he was terrified that we weren't going to get the episode filmed. He said, "Do not stop the filming. Under no circumstances stop the filming."
That's right. Don't mess with the X-Files.
Yeah, it was definitely global. You know that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. We got so many fans. Oh, I mean, all around the world, but in particularly in Britain, and all around Germany, huge. We had a I was in my office one day and I heard this sound. It was the strangest sound. It sounded like, literally sounded like locusts. It just I was like, it was just sounded like a bunch of locusts. And I came out of my area where my office was. It came out to an open area. We had a sort of area with all the props were laid out for show and tell and all this stuff. And there were about 36 Japanese tourists with cameras taking pictures of everything they could find, and they all had motor drives, and they were taking pictures. They were literally pointing their cameras into the trash can, whatever was in it, taking pictures of whatever was on the wall, anything that they could do. They were in there for and nobody spoke English. They were all part of a tour group that came to get a tour of the studio where the X-Files was filmed. They were in there about 10, 15 minutes, and they all just bowed and nodded very graciously and took pictures of us and everything, and then they were just gone. They were on a bus and they were out of there. It was just a surreal experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. You walk out and there's just a swarm of them taking pictures of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, didn't Chris Carter say something like that you wanted to ask him?
Oh, about so he was telling us the process, how they write it and then they hand off the script to you guys and then you present it back to him, the props and stuff. And I wanted to know about how that was for you, like from your end of it.
Well, first of all, I felt honored that what they took the work that we did seriously. But I had I don't know how I didn't want to be the kind of person who would say in a meeting, well, that's not done like that. It's not done like that. That's not correct. That's not accurate. That's not helpful.
Right.
What we would do is, if they would send us a script, we would look at it and I say, well, this isn't right. This isn't right. And sometimes it was stuff that I knew, and other times it was stuff that I had to research. But what you always have to do is always have to offer alternatives. You don't just say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is
right.
Well, this isn't technically correct, but we can do this instead, or we can do that instead, or this instead, and it'll still be cool, but it'll be right. And it was very important to be right. So funny, because I was just thinking in that same episode where we had about the ship transporting the UFO. At the beginning of an episode, it starts off, there's a downed World War II pilot down in a plane, and we used what's called a newt suit, a deep sea diving suit.
Yeah.
And we shot in the episode. We shot in a tank here in North Vancouver here, and where they find the plane. And the pilot in the plane was my buddy Rob Mayer, who is our head of our construction. He played the pilot. He's got his diving lessons just to be able to play that part, and he got his diving certificate so he could play that part. But anyway, so we needed to find out, and the first script that had come out they talked in the script in dialogue that what gave the coordinates of where this plane would be downed in the South Pacific, or actually it was in more like the North Pacific, and it was like, and I looked it up on the map. And I just did a rudimentary check, and I said, Chris, this coordinate there puts it right in the Marianas Trench. It's the deepest place on Earth. There's no way you could get down there. It's 5 miles deep. There's no way you could get down anyone down there to retrieve this plane. So he said, I'm rewriting the script on the weekend. Can you come in on the weekend and figure this out for me? Give me the proper coordinates where you think it should be. So I spent 2 days on the phone making long distance phone calls to dive shops all over the Southern Pacific Islands to try and find a best place for where this plane might have been. And I finally got the coordinates and it sent it to Chris, and he was at home. He was writing, So I would just come up with an idea, and I'd send it to him, and he'd say, "Yeah, I'd really want it to be more south than that." So I'd get on the phone again and start talking to some other people, and eventually found a place. But there was, I hate to say there was no expense spared, but a lot of times they weren't. It had to be right. We wanted to get it right. And that's what it was about, getting it right.
And the quality, and when you watch the show, at that time and right now, it still holds up great.
Yeah, it does. That's why I think, aside from the phones look like bricks in people's hands and stuff, but I mean, you can still see the level of detail that we went to, and technical accuracy as much as possible, and Chris appreciated that. So what did he say about did he say that the scripts used to go to our department first for?
I was asking him how involved he was in the props, and he was like, he would just hand off the scripts to you guys, and then you would come back there'd be another meeting after you did your magic and show him. So I'm like, how much detail did he give you before you had to go and create these things? Like, how did you?
Oh, he had a pretty, if it was specifically, particularly a script that he'd written. Here's an example of how you remember the alien bounty hunter Stiletto, right?
Yeah.
Which is what I designed that, and then we had a future episode where we had the bounty hunter had a fire starting wand that would touch people and they self-emulate. I basically asked Chris, what did you want this to look like? Now I had an idea in my head a little bit, but I said, what do you want this to look like? All he said to me was, make it look like it came from the same factory as the alien Stiletto. But I knew his shorthand. I knew what he was talking about. I was in his head. I knew what Chris liked. I knew what Chris wanted. So when new directors came in that didn't know the show, I could say, look, he's not going to go for this. It's got to be like this. This is what he wants. I know what he wants. We've got to do it this way. And they if they were smart, they didn't put up a fuss, and they relented, and they did it, because I knew. I mean, I knew from the very beginning of the show what Chris wanted. I knew what the show was about. I knew what was in his head about what this stuff should be. I was a Kolchak fan. I was a fan of all this other background material that the show is based on. I'd read the Behold the Pale Horse and all the stuff all these things that sort of fed into the mythology. So I knew all that, and so I just knew. There was a shorthand. The biggest compliment that I ever got paid was when Chris stopped coming to the prop show and tell for the episodes in about the third season, about the middle of the third season. I knew that we had his complete trust, because he stopped coming because he didn't need to be there anymore. And that was, I said, Chris is not the kind of guy that I don't want to put this the wrong way to make it sound, because he's very appreciative of the work that everybody did. I mean, he's very appreciative.
Oh, absolutely. You can tell.
Yeah. But he's not the kind of guy, and I don't expect pats on the back or attaboys all the time. If you've done, he would tell you if something was wrong, and he knew that you would have the ability and understanding to be able to fix it. He didn't say it. The fact that he didn't say anything, I knew we were doing the right thing. We were on the right track, and that's all I needed. I didn't need to have to be stroked all the time. The fact that he stopped showing up at the show and tells, that was the hugest compliment, because I knew that that we had his complete trust.
Right.
Yeah, that was pretty apparent when he was talking about the whole props process.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
You could just hear it when he was talking, and you could feel the words that he was very genuine.
Oh yeah, no. He had a real affinity for the crew too. I mean, there were no errors with Chris Carter. I mean, first of all, he was the most generous guy I've ever worked with. I mean, just
absolutely
unbelievably generous. I mean, he flew myself and my assistant down to the X-Files Expo in San Francisco the first time. Did you guys go to? Did you?
You missed out on that.
Yeah, I missed out on that.
Oh, it's too bad. He flew us down, first class, put us up in a hotel, and it was just he just wanted to let us see our work. I mean, that was just a thank you. And that he flew. I don't know how many people down when he was nominated for a Directors Guild Award, which happened on the same weekend, by the way. Which is the reason why I didn't go to the Directors Guild for the ceremony is because I was down at the other thing. But he flew everybody, like about 12 people from the office, down to Beverly Hills for this award, and it's like, I mean, that's
yeah.
I don't care how many millions of dollars you make, nobody's forcing you to spend that, right? I mean,
right. Yeah, he's a very kind and generous,
Oh, absolutely, and he's a kind of person. It was, if you would go to set, I needed to go to set many times just to talk to him if he were on set, and I'd try to find him. It was, in a way, it was frustrating because normally you go to set, where the producer's going to be. He's going to be standing beside the monitor watching the filming. Chris could be in any number of one of the work trucks just talking to the guys. He'd be I think he's in the lighting truck, or I think he's in the grip truck. Oh, okay. Well, he's just talking to the special effects guy, just sitting just hanging out, just talking to the boys, and and that's just the way it was. I mean,
Yeah, we got the same feel,
Yeah.
I mean, when he got a hold of us, I mean, first things first, you got the email from Chris Carter, and she leaves her desk at her job just to call me, and
as diehard fans, you could just imagine. I open our
wow.
personal email, and
hey, listen, I'd be thrilled to get an email from Chris Carter today too. I mean, I mean, he's a genius. What he's done is pure genius.
I agree.
Exactly. And believe it or not, there's a bunch of shows that contribute to it too. But if it wasn't for the X-Files, X-Files helped put the Fox network on the map.
Oh yeah. However, that being said, X-Files and Chris Carter is also responsible for the existence of reality television, because we spent so much money on this show. Every other show raised the bar, and they tried to compete. The networks said, we got to get the writer producer out of the equation here somehow. We got to come up with something so that writer producers don't run the show anymore.
Right.
And that's where reality TV came from. So that's
it's not Chris's fault.
It's well, it's not just Chris' fault. It's all of our fault, because I mean, there are a lot of production managers in town who are very resentful because when X-Files was filming, well, that was the bar, and they would say, well, right, we need this amount of people. X-Files has this many people. We do this, or well, X-Files spends this amount of money. You got to up my budget. So. That was I got a lot of resentment from a lot of the bean counters over that.
Right. And then the X-Files got really it got popular, and then all of a sudden you started seeing celebrity guest stars coming on.
Yeah.
And then you knew people. I mean, I would turn on like the news or like Late Night with David Letterman, way back then.
Yeah.
And then you had some people that they're like, I'm trying to be on the X-Files.
Everybody was an X-Files fan, right?
Yeah.
It was the show to be on. I mean, every actor was trying to get their agent to get them a walk on in an X-Files episode. I mean, it was just everybody wanted to direct an episode of the X-Files, and very few people could really do it well.
Right.
And we ended up getting a stable of directors by the end of the tenure up here. That it was just there was a group of people who got it. You either got it or you didn't. And it's so funny here. But just a sideline. Speaking of directing, here's a little trivia for you. I was the first insert director for the X-Files. Because in the first season, we used to do inserts for the really really close up shots if you wanted to if you want to see like a particular thing. And I remember the first thing the insert that I directed was for the episode Ice, and David Nutter called me. He said, "Look, I need a couple of quick shots of the little worms on the floor. They're going to be doing this. We can do this." And he told me the 3 shots that he wanted. So I went to the set with my little cardboard box full of worms, the alien worms, and we had a little piece of floor made that we're going to show. And then we were going to do this, and so we had to wait. I was on set waiting for a camera to come available and a camera crew. I took this camera crew over and I said, "Oh, so we got to do this." Now we had the person who was supposed to be directing it was one of the producer's assistant, but she didn't really have a grounding in cinema. Didn't know what lenses to use. Didn't know what the speed to run it at. Everything. But I had studied filmmaking, so I kind of had that knowledge, and I knew the shots that were needed, and so I just took control, and I ended up shooting all these inserts. Now this was at a time when, well, I remember we shot those inserts on Wednesday night. The show used to air on Friday nights at that point in the beginning of the first season. And we were shooting on film. It wasn't on video. It was 35mm film. So they had just enough time we shot these. We got 3 shots. They had just enough time to process the film. They didn't even have time to get the negative down to Los Angeles. They scanned the negative and sent it down over fiber optic cable to Los Angeles to be able to insert it into the show to make it for Friday night, to get it there in time. There was not time to do it any other way. That's how quick the schedule was. And I shot this like at Wednesday night at like 11:30 or something, and so they had to. So there was nothing happened until the next day. They had to had to do a special run in the lab to get it processed and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of a big deal. That's just there was a fair bit of urgency. So anyways, that was the first. I directed a lot of the inserts for the first 3 seasons until someone from the Directors Guild showed up on set and saw my name on a slate. I was directing inserts, and he said, "Wait a minute, you're not in the Directors Guild. You can't be doing this. What's going on here?" So that was the end of my short-lived directing career on the X-Files. But yeah.
Well, since you were talking about the episode Ice, and
that's another favorite in this house.
It's
a great episode. It's a fantastic. It's David Nutter's first episode.
It's a fantastic episode. Do you see the similarities and why people compare it to John Carpenter's The Thing?
Oh, that was our touchstone. That's what we were emulating. It was the script had that sense of paranoia, that John Carpenter's Thing had, and that's a great movie. It's so funny because I worked years and years later, and I remember a producer got so fed up with what the visual effects coordinator saying we could do this, we couldn't do this. Why? And he said, "I don't understand why we can't do this. You've got John Carpenter's Thing. There were no visual effects shots, and it was all practical effects, and it was scary as hell. I mean, why do you need to do all this, grand visual effects for everything? It was like." It was incredible. But yeah, that was basically the touchstone for Ice, definitely. And also we tried to emulate the look of the props too, to make it look like that kind of not military, but it's sort of almost military scientific kind of look, So
I remember when John Carpenter's The Thing first came out. I was younger, and I saw opening day at the drive-ins.
At the what? Drive-in?
At the drive-ins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and believe it or not, his movie The Thing, believe it or not, a lot of critics hated it, and it did not do well at the box office.
I know. But here's the thing. I had a roommate of mine who years earlier he worked as a radio operator on a dew line station up in the Arctic Circle. A station just like that. It was in the Arctic rather than the Antarctic. I went to go see The Thing with him, and just the fact he was crawling out of his skin. And he was, because he had been in that same city. He'd been in exactly one of those camps in the same kind of situation. He was just crawling out of his skin, terrified by that movie.
Right. Yeah.
It's a great movie.
and
it still holds up. It's another one that still holds up too.
Oh yeah, that holds up. The Wilderness one, Darkness Falls.
Yeah, yeah.
That one holds up, and
it does. Yeah.
You had Ice, which was way up, in Antarctic, and then you had Firewalker, which was almost kind of like this, like Ice.
Yeah.
The similarities.
Yeah. It was, and that was season 1 also, I think, too, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it was good. I've worked with that actor so many times after that, and he always comes up to me, and it's like, what, 30 years later now? Every time I work with him, he always comes up and shakes my hand because that was a great role for him, right? So he always remembers that part on the X-Files. So.
Right. Yeah.
So in Ice, those worms.
Yeah.
I want to know, tell us how they were made.
Well, the worms were mealworms, right? If you look at look at mealworms, you'll see those same. We used real worms.
Really?
When there's some when they were in the shots when they're in the liquid and they're fighting coming out, that was CGI. That was visual effects. But that was really the only shot that I remember that was visual effects. Most of the time we use real worms, because they just first of all,
like when she was gonna drop it in the lady's ear, remember that?
Yeah, you saw it all moving around in her hand and all that.
But that was an homage to Wrath of Khan, right? Star Trek. Yes. Wrath of Khan. Yeah. The earwig thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But it is, once again, you had another director there, David Nutter, who got it, and got it big time.
Exactly. Yes.
And he got it right off the bat, but it was that fine line of taking, using movies as a starting off point, like let's say The Thing. Mm-hmm. as a visual, not really template, but just kind of a starting out point, a point of conversation, and then making it a whole new thing, and you turning it into your own thing. We didn't really paid homage. We didn't copy things directly, which so many other shows do, which I find really bothersome. And I've been on shows where they go, "Oh yeah, we want to recreate this shot from blah blah blah." And I remember I worked on a series, and John Badham was our director. Came in. John Badham, the great feature director's done. I mean, and he's just a legend in the film industry. And he came in, and someone, one of the writers wanted to recreate the shot from this certain movie and do it just like that. And he goes, because that was so cool. And he goes, well, yeah. John said, yeah, it was really cool. That was great. It was a really cool shot. It worked really well. And why don't we do our own shot, make it really cool? Then 25 years from now, someone will be looking at it and goes, hey, why don't we do that shot just like we had in that show?
Right.
Right. It can only be cool once, right? The first time you see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just if it's too close, if it's mimicked too much,
Right.
yeah, I don't know.